The morning sun barely touched the concrete steps of Riverside Apartments when David pulled up in his beat-up Honda Civic. At 52, he looked nothing like the successful businessman who owned this building and dozens of others across the city. His expensive suits were replaced with faded jeans, worn work boots, and a simple blue shirt with Metro Maintenance printed on the back. David had built his real estate empire from nothing, starting with a single duplex 20 years ago. Now he controlled over 200 rental units, but lately something was wrong. Complaints were pouring in faster than he could handle them. Rent collections were down 30%. His property managers kept giving him reports, but the numbers didn't tell the whole story. He needed to see what was really happening on the ground, so here he was, pretending to be just another maintenance guy. His own employees didn't even know who he really was. He'd hired himself through a temp agency, creating a fake identity complete with references. It was risky, but David had always believed in getting his hands dirty when business got tough. Grabbed his toolbox from the trunk and walked toward the building. The place looked worse than he remembered from his last official visit 6 months ago. Paint was peeling from the walls, and several windows had cracks running through them like spider webs. A few residents sat on the front steps, and David could feel their eyes following him as he approached. "You the new maintenance guy?" asked an older man with salt and pepper hair, sitting on the bottom step with a cup of coffee. "That's right," David replied, adjusting his baseball cap. "Name's Dave. Starting today." The man chuckled and shook his head. "Good luck, buddy. We've been waiting 3 weeks for someone to fix Mrs. Johnson's heater. Hope you last longer than the last guy." David made a mental note about the heater as he walked past. This was exactly the kind of information he needed. His property management company had told him everything was running smoothly, but clearly, that wasn't true. As he reached for the building's front door, he noticed a young girl sitting alone on the side steps. She couldn't have been older than 17 or 18, with long dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a grocery store uniform, the kind with a name tag and everything. But what caught David's attention was the envelope in her hands. She kept opening it, counting something inside, then closing it again. Her shoulders were tense, and even from a distance David could see the worry written all across her face. She looked like she was carrying the weight of the world, which seemed too heavy for someone so young. David had seen that look before. It was the same expression he'd worn 25 years ago when he was struggling to make ends meet, working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over his head. Back then, he would sit outside his cheap apartment, counting and recounting his money, hoping somehow the numbers would magically add up to enough. He decided to introduce himself. Walking over casually, he set his toolbox down and pulled out a clipboard, trying to look official. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I'm the new maintenance guy, Dave. Just wondering if you've had any issues with your apartment that need fixing." The girl looked up, and David could see her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying recently. She quickly wiped her face and tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, hi, I live in 2B. The apartment's fine, really. Everything works okay." Her voice was soft but tired, like someone who'd been fighting battles for too long. David nodded, but something in her tone made him want to know more. "You sure? Sometimes small problems turn into big ones if we don't catch them early. Leaky faucets, heating issues, anything like that?" She shook her head quickly. "No, really, everything's fine. I don't want to cause any trouble." That phrase hit David hard. "I don't want to cause any trouble." He'd said those exact words countless times when he was young and struggling. It was the voice of someone who felt invisible, someone who was used to being overlooked. "No trouble at all," David said, keeping his voice warm and friendly. "That's what I'm here for. Mind if I ask what's got you looking so worried? Sometimes us maintenance folks hear about problems before the office does." Girl glanced around nervously, then looked down at the envelope in her hands. For a moment, David thought she might open up, but then she seemed to change her mind. "It's nothing, just grown-up stuff, you know?" She forced another smile. "I should probably get going. I have to be at work soon." As she stood up and started walking toward the street, David noticed her grocery store uniform again. The shirt was a little too big, and her shoes looked like they'd seen better days. She walked with purpose, But there was something defeated in the way she carried herself. David spent the rest of the morning getting familiar with the building. He introduced himself to residents, checked out various maintenance issues, and started making a list of problems that needed fixing. But his mind kept drifting back to the girl from 2B. Around lunchtime, he decided to check the building's records. Using his master key, he slipped into the property management office in the basement. The filing cabinets were a mess, but he eventually found what he was looking for. Apartment 2B was rented to someone named Lisa Chen, 17 years old, which meant she was likely emancipated or had some kind of guardian situation. The lease had been signed 8 months ago, and according to the payment records, she'd never been late with rent. Not once. Until this month. The current month showed no payment yet, and they were already 5 days past the due date. There were several notes in the file about phone calls to the tenant, but no responses. David looked at the amount due and whistled softly. For a 17-year-old working at a grocery store, $850 a month was probably a huge chunk of her income. He was putting the file back when he heard voices in the hallway above. One of them sounded familiar. It was Lisa, and she seemed to be on the phone with someone. David quietly climbed the stairs and positioned himself near the maintenance closet, close enough to hear but far enough away to not be obvious about listening. "Please, I just need 3 more days," Lisa was saying, her voice strained. "I get paid on Friday and I can give you the full amount then. I've never been late before. Yes, I understand the policy, but..." There was a long pause, and David could practically feel her frustration through the wall. I know. It's just that they cut my hours at the store and my other job doesn't pay until next week. I'm trying to find more work, but..." Okay, I understand. Thank you for giving me until Friday." David heard her hang up and let out a long, shaky breath. A few seconds later, he heard her apartment door close with a soft click. Standing there in the dim hallway, David felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about fixing broken pipes or collecting rent anymore. This was about a kid, barely older than his own daughter, trying to survive on her own. And from what he could tell, she was doing everything right. Working multiple jobs, paying her bills, staying out of trouble. But sometimes doing everything right still wasn't enough. David picked up his toolbox and headed toward the upper floors. He had maintenance work to do, but more importantly, he had some investigating to do. He needed to understand Lisa's situation better before he could figure out how to help. After all, the best solutions always came from understanding the real problem first. The next morning, David arrived at Riverside Apartments with a different mission. He'd spent half the night thinking about Lisa and her phone conversation. Something about her situation reminded him too much of his own past, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. He decided to start his day by fixing the broken pipe on the second floor. It was a legitimate maintenance issue, but it also happened to be right down the hall from apartment 2B. As he set up his tools and started working, he could hear the sounds of daily life through the thin walls. Around 8 in the morning, he heard Lisa's door open. She was talking to someone on the phone again, and her voice carried that same worried tone from yesterday. "Mom, I know you said you'd try to send something, but please don't worry about it if you can't," Lisa was saying as she walked past David in the hallway. She gave him a small wave and kept talking. "I'll figure it out, I always do. No, I'm not going to ask anyone for help. I can handle this myself." David pretended to be focused on his pipe work, but he was listening to every word. Lisa continued down the hallway toward the stairs, her voice getting fainter. "I just need to pick up some extra shifts somewhere. Maybe the coffee shop downtown is hiring. I love you too, Mom. Don't stress about this, okay?" After she left, David found himself staring at the pipe in his hands. The kid was protecting her mother from worry while dealing with her own financial crisis. That took a special kind of strength. He finished the pipe repair and decided to take a walk around the building. He wanted to talk to other residents, get a feel for what life was really like here. His first stop was Mrs. Patterson in apartment 1A, the elderly woman he'd heard about yesterday. Mrs. Patterson answered her door with a warm smile. She was probably in her 70s with silver hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. "You must be the new maintenance fellow," she said, opening her door wider. Come in, Would you like some tea? David accepted the invitation and found himself in a cozy living room filled with family photos and knitted blankets. Mrs. Patterson bustled around making tea, talking the whole time. "It's so nice to have someone reliable around here again," she said, handing him a steaming cup. The last maintenance man barely knew which end of a screwdriver to hold. "I heard you've been having some issues with your heater?" David asked. "Oh, that old thing has been acting up for weeks. But you know what? That sweet girl from upstairs, Lisa, she's been bringing me extra blankets. Even offered to let me stay in her apartment if it gets too cold." Mrs. Patterson's eyes lit up as she talked about Lisa. "That child has a heart of gold. Sounds like she's a good neighbor," David said, fishing for more information. "The best. You know, just last week she helped me carry my groceries up the stairs. All 4 bags, and she wouldn't let me give her a penny for it." Mrs. Patterson shook her head admiringly. "And she tutors the Wilson kids for free every Tuesday and Thursday. Those children's grades have improved so much since she started helping them." David nearly choked on his tea. "She tutors kids for free?" "Every week, without fail. She sets up right there in the courtyard when the weather's nice or in the lobby when it's raining. Math, English, science, that girl knows it all. The Wilson kids adore her and their parents keep trying to pay her, but she always refuses." This was getting more interesting by the minute. David spent another 20 minutes with Mrs. Patterson, learning more about the building's residents and their daily struggles. But every conversation seemed to circle back to Lisa and how much she helped others despite her own challenges. His next stop was the Wilson family in apartment 3C. Mrs. Wilson answered the door with a baby on her hip and another toddler clinging to her leg. "Sorry about the chaos," she said, moving aside to let David in. "Are you here about the leaky ceiling in the bathroom?" "Actually, yes," David said, though he'd just learned about the leak from Mrs. Patterson. "Mind if I take a look?" As he inspected the bathroom ceiling, Mrs. Wilson talked about the building's problems. But just like with Mrs. Patterson, the conversation eventually turned to Lisa. "That girl is an angel," Mrs. Wilson said, bouncing the baby gently. "My oldest 2 were failing math and reading, and I couldn't afford a tutor. Lisa found out somehow, and just started showing up every Tuesday and Thursday with workbooks and patience." "That's really kind of her," David said, making notes about the leak. "Kind doesn't even cover it. Last month, when my husband lost his job for 2 weeks, Lisa brought us groceries. Said she had extra from her work, but I know she bought them herself. When I tried to pay her back, she just smiled and said to pay it forward someday." David felt a knot forming in his stomach. Here was a 17-year-old girl who could barely make her own rent, and she was buying groceries for struggling families. "How does she afford to do all this?" he asked carefully. Mrs. Wilson's expression grew concerned. "I don't think she can, honestly. I've seen her counting change at the corner store, choosing between bread and milk, but she's too proud to let anyone help her back. Always says she's fine, even when it's obvious she's not." After fixing the bathroom leak, David spent the rest of the afternoon talking to more residents. The picture that emerged was consistent and heartbreaking. Lisa was beloved by everyone in the building. She helped elderly residents with heavy groceries, tutored children for free, shared food when others were struggling, and never asked for anything in return. But the more David learned about her generosity, the more he understood why she was struggling financially. She was giving away money and time she couldn't afford to give. Around 5 in the evening, David was in the lobby pretending to fix a loose handrail when Lisa came home from work. She looked exhausted, her grocery store uniform wrinkled and her hair falling out of its ponytail. She was carrying a small bag from the store and talking on her phone again. "I know the rent was due 5 days ago," she was saying as she climbed the stairs. "Yes, I understand there will be a late fee. I'll have it all by Friday, I promise, the full amount plus the $50 penalty." David's hands tightened on his screwdriver. $50 might not sound like much to him, but for Lisa, that was probably a day's worth of groceries. She paused on the landing above him, and he could hear her voice getting more strained. "I understand you have to follow the rules. I'm not asking you to break policy. I've never been late before, And I won't be late again. I'm picking up extra shifts this week. Yes, I know that's what everyone says, but I mean it. There was a long pause, then David heard her voice crack slightly. Please don't start eviction proceedings. This is my home. I'll have the money by Friday, I swear on my grandmother's memory. David had heard enough. He quietly packed up his tools and headed toward his car. But instead of leaving, he sat in the parking lot for another hour, watching the building and thinking. Through Lisa's apartment window, he could see her moving around. The lights were dim, probably trying to save on electricity. Around 7 o'clock, he saw her leave again, this time wearing different clothes. She was probably heading to her second job. As David finally drove home to his comfortable house in the suburbs, he couldn't stop thinking about the contrast. Here he was, worth millions, complaining about profit margins, while a 17-year-old girl was choosing between paying rent and eating dinner. But what struck him most wasn't just Lisa's financial struggle. It was her character. In a world where people often looked out only for themselves, she was quietly taking care of everyone around her. She was the kind of person who made communities stronger, who made life better for others without expecting anything back. And she was about to lose her home because she was $50 short on rent. That night, David made a decision. He wasn't going to let that happen. David couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lisa's worried face and heard her voice cracking as she begged not to be evicted. By 4 in the morning, he gave up trying to rest and went to his home office instead. Needed to know more about Lisa's situation before he could help her properly. David had learned over the years that good intentions without good information often led to bad results. He pulled up his company's tenant database on his computer and searched for apartment 2B. The lease application told him more than he'd expected. Lisa Chen, age 17, had moved in 8 months ago. Her emergency contact was listed as her mother, who lived 3 states away. Under employment, she'd listed 2 jobs, part-time cashier at Metro Grocery and weekend hostess at a local diner. But what caught David's attention was a note in the application comments. Lisa had written a short letter explaining her situation. David read it twice, feeling his heart sink with each word. I know it's unusual for someone my age to rent an apartment alone, the letter began. My grandmother raised me since I was 5, and when she passed away 6 months ago, I inherited her small savings account. I'm using that money for the security deposit and first month's rent. I work 2 part-time jobs and have been accepted to Central Community College for next fall, but I deferred my enrollment to focus on supporting myself. I promised to be a good tenant and take care of the apartment like it was my own home. David sat back in his chair. Lisa hadn't just lost her housing situation, she'd lost the person who raised her. She was completely on her own, working 2 jobs and trying to figure out how to survive as a teenager in an expensive city. He dug deeper into the records and found something that made his stomach turn. Lisa's grandmother, Mrs. Rose Chen, had been a tenant in the same building for 15 years. She'd lived in apartment 2B until her death, and Lisa had simply taken over the lease. The girl wasn't just trying to pay rent, she was trying to keep the only home she'd ever known. David made a decision. He was going to help Lisa, but he needed to do it right. Simply paying her rent would solve the immediate problem, but it wouldn't address the bigger issues. She needed stability, better income, and a chance to build a real future. The next morning, David arrived at Riverside Apartments with a new plan. He was going to learn everything he could about Lisa's daily routine, her goals, and her challenges. Only then could he figure out how to help without making her feel like a charity case. He started by fixing the heating system in Mrs. Patterson's apartment. While he worked, he asked casual questions about Lisa's schedule. She's always so busy, Mrs. Patterson said, handing him a wrench. Leaves for her first job at the grocery store around 7 in the morning, comes home around 3, then heads out again for her evening job at that diner downtown. Poor child barely has time to eat. Must be exhausting, David said, adjusting the heating unit. It is. Sometimes I hear her studying late at night. She's got all these textbooks from the library, trying to keep up with her education, even though she's not in school. She told me once that she wants to be a teacher someday. David paused his work. A teacher? She's got the heart for it, that's for sure. You should see her with the Wilson kids. So patient, so encouraging. She makes learning fun for them. Mrs. Patterson smiled warmly. But I worry about her. She's too young to be carrying all this responsibility alone. Later that afternoon, David positioned himself in the building's lobby, pretending to work on the mailboxes. He wanted to observe Lisa's routine firsthand. Around 3:30, she came through the front door, looking tired but trying to stay positive. "Hi, Dave," she said, giving him a small wave. "How's the maintenance work going?" "Pretty good," David replied. "Lot of little things to fix around here, but that's normal for an older building." Lisa nodded and headed toward the stairs, but David called out to her. "Hey, Lisa, mind if I ask you something?" She stopped and turned back, looking a little surprised that he knew her name. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned you helped tutor some kids in the building. That's really nice of you." Lisa's cheeks turned slightly pink. "Oh, it's nothing special. I just help them with homework sometimes. They're good kids." "Still, not many people your age would take the time to do that," David said, genuinely impressed. "You thinking about becoming a teacher?" Her whole face lit up at the question. For the first time since David had met her, Lisa looked truly happy. "That's the dream," she said, her voice full of hope. "I want to teach elementary school. I love watching kids learn new things and seeing their faces light up when they finally understand something difficult." "That's a great goal," David said. "You planning to go to college for it?" The happiness faded from Lisa's face almost immediately. "I was supposed to start at Central Community College this fall, but I had to defer. Maybe next year if I can save up enough money." David felt that familiar knot in his stomach. Here was a kid with clear goals and the determination to achieve them, but she was trapped by circumstances beyond her control. "Well, I hope it works out for you," he said gently. "The world needs more good teachers." Lisa smiled sadly. "Thanks. I should get going. I need to grab something to eat before my evening shift." As she headed upstairs, David noticed she was carrying a small bag from the dollar store instead of the grocery store where she worked, probably buying the cheapest food she could find to stretch her budget. That evening, David decided to visit the diner where Lisa worked her second job. He wanted to see her in that environment, understand how she was managing 2 jobs plus her responsibilities at home. The diner was a typical small-town place with vinyl booths and a counter that had seen better days. David took a seat at a corner table where he could observe without being obvious. Lisa was working the dinner rush, seating customers and managing the host station with quiet efficiency. Even though she looked exhausted, Lisa greeted every customer with a genuine smile. David watched her help an elderly man who was having trouble reading the menu, guide a family with young children to a table near the kids' area, and patiently answer questions about the daily specials. "First time here?" asked the waitress who came to take David's order. "Yeah, just checking out the neighborhood," David replied. "That hostess seems really nice." The waitress, whose name tag read Jenny, followed David's gaze to Lisa. "Oh, Lisa, she's the best. Been working here about 6 months and she's never called in sick, never showed up late. Always has a smile for everyone, even when she's clearly running on fumes." "Must be tough working 2 jobs, David said. "Tell me about it. I don't know how she does it. She's here 5 nights a week plus weekends and she still finds time to help other people. Last week she stayed late to help me clean up after we got slammed with a bus full of tourists. Wouldn't even let me split the extra tip money with her." David ordered a coffee and sat there for 2 hours, watching Lisa work. She was professional, kind, and hardworking, but he could see the exhaustion in her movements, the way she sometimes had to steady herself against the counter when she thought no one was looking. Around 9 o'clock, David paid his bill and left. But instead of going home, he sat in his car outside the diner, waiting. He wanted to see what Lisa did after work, whether she had any time for herself, or if she went straight home to study. At 10:30, Lisa finally left the diner. David watched her walk to the bus stop, checking her phone for the schedule. She looked so small standing there under the streetlight, just a teenager trying to make it in a world that seemed determined to knock her down. But what impressed David most was that despite everything, losing her grandmother, working 2 jobs, struggling to pay rent, helping everyone else in the building, Lisa hadn't given up. She was still dreaming about becoming a teacher. She was still helping other people. She was still fighting for her future. As David drove home that night, he knew exactly what he had to do. Lisa wasn't just someone who needed help. She was someone worth investing in. And David was going to make sure she got the chance she deserved. The plan he'd been forming in his mind was ambitious. But if it worked, it wouldn't just change Lisa's life. It would give her the tools to change other people's lives, too. And that, David thought, was exactly the kind of investment the world needed more of. David spent the next 3 days putting together the most important plan of his business career. But this wasn't about profit margins or investment returns. This was about giving a deserving young woman the chance she'd earned through her hard work and character. He started by making some phone calls from his real office downtown. The first call was to his property management company. "I need you to create a new community assistance program," David told his property manager, Rebecca. "Something that helps tenants who are struggling but have shown they're responsible and contribute positively to the community." Rebecca sounded confused. "Sir, we've never done anything like that before. What would be the criteria?" "Perfect payment history until recent hardship, positive impact on other residents, and a clear plan for stability," David explained. "I want it to look completely legitimate because it is legitimate. This isn't charity, it's investment in good people." His next call was to the community college where Lisa had deferred her admission. David had a long conversation with the financial aid office about setting up an anonymous scholarship fund for students who showed academic promise, but faced financial barriers. "We have students like that every semester," the counselor told him. "Bright kids who want to learn but can't afford school. A scholarship fund would change lives." "That's exactly what I'm hoping for," David said. The hardest part was creating a job opportunity that wouldn't seem suspicious. David owned a small office building downtown where his property management company was located. He decided to create a part-time position in their community outreach department, a department that didn't exist yet but would by the end of the week. On Thursday morning, David was back at Riverside Apartments, working on a broken window in the lobby when his phone rang. He'd been expecting this call. "Dave, this is Rebecca from Metro Property Management. I know you're just the maintenance guy, but do you know anything about the tenant in 2B, Lisa Chen?" David tried to sound casual. "Yeah, I've met her. Seems like a nice kid. Why?" "Well, this is unusual, but she's been selected for our new community assistance program. I need to contact her about rent relief and some other opportunities, but I wanted to make sure she's legit first." "From what I've seen, she's one of the good ones," David said honestly. "Always polite, helps other residents, works hard." "What kind of opportunities?" "Housing assistance, a potential part-time job with better pay and some educational support. Between you and me, I've never seen the company do anything like this before, but apparently it's a new initiative from upper management." David smiled to himself. "Sounds like she could use the help. I'll give her a call this afternoon." After Rebecca hung up, David felt nervous for the first time in years. He'd built businesses, negotiated million-dollar deals, and taken risks that would make most people lose sleep. But waiting to see if Lisa would accept help from what she thought was a stranger, that was terrifying. Around 2 o'clock, David was pretending to fix a loose tile in the lobby when Lisa came home from her morning shift at the grocery store. She looked different today, excited, almost bouncing with energy. "Dave," she called out as she saw him. "You'll never believe what just happened." David looked up from his work, trying to appear surprised. "Good news, I hope?" "The best news. The property management company called me about some kind of community assistance program. They're offering to help with my rent this month and maybe set me up with a better job." Lisa's eyes were bright with hope. "I mean, I've never heard of them doing anything like this before, but apparently I qualified because I've been a good tenant and help other people in the building." "That's amazing," David said, and he meant it. Seeing Lisa happy was better than any business success he'd ever achieved. What kind of job? Something with their community outreach department. The woman on the phone said it pays $15 an hour, and I could work around my school schedule when I start college again. Lisa paused, looking almost afraid to believe it was real. She said there might even be scholarship opportunities available. David felt his chest tighten with emotion. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? That's what I'm worried about, Lisa admitted. I keep waiting for the catch, you know? Things like this don't usually happen to people like me. Maybe they do, David said gently. Maybe you've just been working so hard to take care of everyone else that you haven't noticed the good things coming your way. Lisa considered this for a moment. The woman wants to meet with me tomorrow morning to discuss everything. I'm nervous about taking time off work, but she said it was important. I think you should go, David encouraged. What's the worst that could happen? You hear them out, and if it doesn't feel right, you say no thanks. You're right, Lisa said, her confidence growing. I've got nothing to lose by listening. The next morning, David made sure to be working in the lobby when Lisa left for her meeting. She was wearing her best outfit, a simple dress that was probably from a thrift store but looked neat and professional. Her hair was pulled back and she carried a small folder that probably contained her resume and other documents. Wish me luck, she said as she headed toward the door. You don't need luck, David replied. You've got something better. You've earned this. While Lisa was at her meeting, David worked on legitimate maintenance issues around the building. But his mind was completely focused on what was happening downtown. He'd briefed Rebecca carefully about what to offer and how to present it, but ultimately, Lisa had to make her own choice. Around noon, David's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Meeting went great. She's perfect for this. Starting Monday. David felt like he could finally breathe again. When Lisa returned that afternoon, she looked like a completely different person. The worry lines that had become permanent fixtures on her face were gone, replaced by genuine joy and excitement. Dave, you were right, she said, finding him in the courtyard where he was trimming some overgrown bushes. Sometimes good things do happen. How did it go? Better than I ever imagined. The job is real. The scholarship program is real, and they're even helping me get caught up on rent so I can start fresh. Lisa sat down on a nearby bench, shaking her head in amazement. The woman I met with, Rebecca, she said they've been watching how I interact with other residents and how I help people. She said that's exactly the kind of person they want working in community outreach. David had to turn away for a moment to hide his smile. What will you be doing exactly? Helping connect residents with resources they need. Things like job training, educational opportunities, financial counseling. Basically, I'll be doing officially what I've been doing unofficially around here. Lisa's voice was full of enthusiasm. And the best part is they're going to help me enroll in college for the spring semester. There's a scholarship program for employees who want to study education. So you can still become a teacher? Not just can, I will, Lisa said with determination. Rebecca said that once I finish my degree, there might be opportunities to develop educational programs for the company's properties. I could actually make a career out of helping people. David felt his throat tighten. This was exactly what he'd hoped for, not just solving Lisa's immediate problems, but giving her a path to build the life she wanted. I'm really happy for you, he said quietly. Thank you, Lisa said, surprising him. I know this sounds weird, but talking to you yesterday helped me believe I deserved something good. You reminded me that I work hard and try to help others, and maybe that means something. As David packed up his tools that evening, he watched Lisa through her apartment window. She was on the phone again, but this time she was laughing and excited, probably calling her mother with the good news. For the first time in days, the lights in her apartment were bright. She wasn't trying to save every penny on electricity anymore. She could afford to light up her world. And David realized that in helping Lisa light up her world, she'd somehow managed to brighten his too. 6 months had passed since David first met Lisa on those apartment steps, and the transformation was remarkable. Not just in Lisa's life, but in the entire building. What had started as one man's desire to help a struggling teenager had somehow grown into something much bigger. David still came to Riverside Apartments twice a week, maintaining his cover as Dave the maintenance guy. But now his visits felt different. The building had come alive in ways he'd never expected. Lisa's apartment had become the unofficial community center. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, the courtyard filled with children carrying backpacks and notebooks. Lisa's tutoring sessions had grown from helping just the Wilson kids to teaching nearly a dozen children from the building and the surrounding neighborhood. "Miss Lisa, I got an A on my math test," 8-year-old Tommy Wilson announced one Tuesday evening as David pretended to check the courtyard lighting. "That's amazing, Tommy," Lisa said, giving him a high five. "See what happens when you practice those multiplication tables every day?" David smiled as he watched the scene. Lisa was glowing, with confidence these days. Her new job in community outreach had started slowly, but she'd thrown herself into it with the same determination she brought to everything else. Within 3 months, she'd helped 5 families in the building connect with job training programs, assisted 2 elderly residents in applying for heating assistance, and even organized a monthly community dinner in the building's basement meeting room. "Dave, can you help me move this table?" Lisa called out. She was setting up for her evening tutoring session, arranging desks and chairs that David's company had quietly donated to the building. "Sure thing," David said, walking over to help. After 6 months of this routine, Lisa had become comfortable around him. She often asked for his help with small tasks, and they'd developed an easy friendship. "You know," Lisa said as they positioned the table, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "This whole community outreach program, the scholarship, even you being here to fix things, it all started happening right around the same time. Almost like someone was looking out for this place, you know?" David felt his heart skip. "Maybe the building was just due for some good luck." "Maybe," Lisa said. But there was something thoughtful in her voice. Or maybe someone cared enough to make good things happen. Before David could respond, Mrs. Patterson appeared with a plate of cookies for the tutoring session. "Lisa, dear, these are for the children," she said, then turned to David. "And Dave, thank you for fixing my heating so well. It's been perfect all winter." "Just doing my job," David replied. "You do a lot more than your job," Mrs. Patterson said with a knowing smile. "This building has never run so smoothly. It's like you actually care about the people who live here." Later that evening, David was packing up his tools when Rebecca called him. "David, I need to talk to you about Lisa," she said. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay. She's incredible at this job. I've never seen someone connect with people the way she does. But here's the thing. She's been asking questions about the community assistance program. Smart questions. She wants to understand how it's funded and whether it can be expanded to other buildings." David felt nervous. "What kind of questions?" "She's wondering why this program doesn't exist anywhere else in the city. She's been researching similar initiatives and apparently nothing like this exists. She's starting to think someone specifically created it for this building." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That it was a new pilot program from upper management. But David, she's smart. Really smart. And she's grateful, but she's also curious. I think she's starting to put pieces together." That night, David lay awake thinking about Rebecca's words. Part of him had always known this moment would come. Lisa was too intelligent and too observant to accept the story forever, but he'd hoped to keep his secret a little longer. The next morning brought the answer to his dilemma in an unexpected way. David was working in the lobby when a man in an expensive suit walked into the building. He looked around with obvious distaste, checking his phone and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Excuse me," the man said to David. "I'm looking for Lisa Chen. I'm told she lives here. Apartment 2B, David said carefully. "Can I ask who's visiting?" "Robert Chen. I'm her cousin." David had never heard Lisa mention any family besides her mother. Something about this felt wrong. "She's at work right now," David said. "Want me to give her a message?" "Actually, maybe you can help me," Robert said, pulling out his phone. "I'm here about our grandmother's apartment. Lisa's been living here since the old woman died, but the family thinks it's time for her to move back home where she belongs. We're concerned about a teenager living alone in a place like this. David felt anger rising in his chest. A place like what? You know, low-income housing. Our family has standards. We're prepared to help Lisa relocate somewhere more appropriate. And by appropriate, you mean? Back home with family who can properly supervise her. She's been playing house long enough. David was about to respond when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Lisa was coming home for lunch earlier than usual. Robert? Lisa's voice was shocked. What are you doing here? Her cousin turned with a condescending smile. Lisa, we need to talk. The family has been discussing your situation, and we think it's time for you to come home. This is my home, Lisa said firmly. I've been taking care of myself just fine. Living in this place, working multiple jobs, struggling to pay rent, that's not taking care of yourself. That's barely surviving. David watched Lisa's face change. The confidence she'd built over the past 6 months seemed to waver. I'm not struggling anymore, she said quietly. I have a good job now and I'm starting college next month. A job with some property management company? Robert laughed. Lisa, be realistic. Come home, finish high school properly, and let the adults handle your future. I am handling my future, Lisa said. But David could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. That's when David made his decision. He couldn't watch Lisa's confidence be destroyed by someone who didn't understand what she'd accomplished. Actually, David said, stepping forward, she's handling her future better than most adults I know. Both Lisa and Robert turned to look at him. Lisa, David continued, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you months ago. Lisa looked confused. What do you mean? David took a deep breath. My name isn't Dave Miller. It's David Chang. And I own this building. I own all the buildings in this complex. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa stared at him, her mouth slightly open. You're... What? I'm the owner. I've been coming here undercover because I wanted to understand what was really happening in my properties. And what I found was you. Robert looked confused. I don't understand. You're dressed like a maintenance worker. Because that's what I've been pretending to be, David said, never taking his eyes off Lisa. Lisa, the community assistance program, the scholarship, the job, I created all of it. Because after watching you for just a few days, I realized you were exactly the kind of person who deserved every opportunity I could provide. Lisa's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, confusion, hurt, and finally understanding. You've been lying to me for 6 months? She asked quietly. I've been helping you for 6 months. David corrected gently. Everything you've achieved, every success you've had, that was all you. I just removed some of the barriers. Robert stepped forward. Wait, you're telling me this maintenance guy is actually wealthy enough to just create job programs? This maintenance guy, David said, finally allowing his business voice to show through, owns more than 200 properties in this city, and this young woman has shown more character and determination than most people I've met in 20 years of business. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. Robert, I think you should leave. This conversation is over. Lisa, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You show up here after 6 months of not caring whether I was alive or dead, and now you want to take control of my life because you think I can't handle it myself. Lisa's voice grew stronger with each word. Well, I've been handling it, and I'm going to keep handling it. After Robert left, Lisa and David stood alone in the lobby. The silence stretched between them. So, Lisa finally said, David Chang. That's right. Why? She asked. Why go through all this trouble? Why not just help directly? David thought about how to explain it. Because direct help creates dependence. What I saw in you was someone who didn't need handouts. You needed opportunities. You needed someone to believe in you and give you a chance to show what you could do. Lisa nodded slowly. And the job? The scholarship? All real. You earned every bit of it through your own work and character. I just made sure the opportunities existed. What happens now? Lisa asked. Now, David said, You keep being the amazing person you've always been. You finish college. You become the teacher you've dreamed of being, and hopefully, you help me figure out how to expand this community program to help other people like you. Lisa smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Other people like me? People who work hard, help others, and deserve a chance to build something better. People who make their communities stronger just by being in them.